What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and in the last couple of weeks or months, some folks have commented that my regular upload schedule is not quite as quick as it normally is. And today I want to talk about exactly the reason for that. I made a miniatures game. Look at all the miniatures. They're right there. That's nice. So this is Breachstorm. This is a game that's been basically a huge passion project of mine for the last 5 or 6 years or so. This isn't like a sponsored video or anything, but this is a game that I make, so no bias whatsoever. The originally kickstarted this game back in 2018, and then the world shut down, and miniature games were not played quite as widely anymore, so we took a little hiatus. The game was not actively in development and wasn't really being played very much, but we came back just over a year ago to basically retool the entire game, re-release it with a 1.0 version, and that is what has been stealing all my time for the last, 2 months or so. This game is kind of just a labor of love of myself and a couple other people. Right now, we essentially are composed of like a 2.5 person team, but we're also assisted by a pretty tight-knit community of players who play with us and help us play test new releases for the game. As it stands, basically 100% of the proceeds of sales of the game components go back into funding additional expansions and new content. So right now, it's mostly just a fun hobby that we do, but we're also very proud of what we've created. So what the heck is Breachstorm? Breachstorm is a science fiction skirmish miniature game. The setting of the game is in a state of interstellar Cold War. These massive interstellar societies have recently gone to war and are now in a state of uneasy peace, but that doesn't mean things are entirely quiet, and small teams of covert operatives are in a constant underground struggle for intelligence, resources, territory, all sorts of black ops missions, and that is what the games in Breachstorm are representing. In the game, you will typically command a team of between 5 and probably 9 models, depending on your faction and your composition. Some factions, like the Volucrit host over here, usually play much larger teams. Some factions, like the Homeworld Confederacy, can play much smaller teams. It's totally up to you. There's a ton of flexibility in the list building, and the game has multiple modes of play. The one that we spent the most time developing was a 1v1 competitive mode with a bunch of narrative twists. That's obviously super fun, but every miniature game has that. But what we are also introducing are 3-player and 4-player multiplayer modes, where those games end up being super wild and zany. A little bit of commander action, if you're familiar with Magic the Gathering, where there's a lot of politicking and negotiation between players of who do you want to screw over. We're also introducing a almost purely narrative, cooperative, and solo mode, which I am particularly very excited about because I think it came out really nice, so I'm very proud of it. In that one, the players will each bring a small component of a team, completing an operation, which can string several missions together with progression mechanics. Your units can level up and gain abilities in between those games as they move through an operation within the game's universe, and all of that is against an AI-controlled opponent. I can't show you too much about that game mode right now, but suffice to say that we will have a lot more to talk about that in the near future. Now, in terms of the factions, each of the factions is very unique. They all have a basically entirely unique set of mechanics. Currently, the game has 3 factions that are fully available. The Homeworld Confederacy are human boys, a little Tau-esque, if you are familiar with Warhammer 40,000, which you probably are if you're on my channel. They have a mechanic called Concentrate Fire, where their units will get more and more effective the more they target a single enemy. So you can essentially act like spotters with early units targeting an enemy with effective attacks, but as the round goes on, your units are going to get more and more powerful. They're all about synergies and overlapping a bunch of buffs to make their range attacks super duper insane. So they work together as a sort of tight-knit team, which is very cool. They feel very special forces. Over here, this is the other starter faction that's in the starter set. This is the Zrenthrar Prize. They're Felinoid aliens, but they're all about martial prowess. They have a strong code of honor, and that actually empowers them on the table as well. As you kill them, they will generate tokens that allow them to make more melee attacks. So even if they die running into enemy gunfire, the ones that do get there are going to be super duper scary. They're mostly about fueling really powerful melee combatants, sort of like single heroes and characters, and also stacking tons and tons of their resource mechanic fury tokens on each other and moving those tokens around. Last but certainly not least, we have the Volcrypt host over here. They're a very horde faction, very insectoid, kind of tyrannidy, but a little bit different. They bring tons and tons of models to the table, including these little guys, these little grubs, which are just little dudes that eat detritus around their hives, but they're a good source of nutrition in a pinch, in a bite, if you will. And Volcrypt models can actually consume each other in order to generate additional attacks during the turn. So their team size is actually enormous. They'll usually start with 15 or 16 models on the table, many of which being their smaller, cheaper, diminutive guys, but that will very quickly reduce in size as the game goes on. As the bugs are injured or debuffed and you don't really need to worry about them anymore, you can just eat them for fuel and continue on. They also have models that will generate new models as well over the course of the game and can repurpose destroyed models in order to continuously fuel the aggression. So they are almost entirely melee-centric, and they fuel that melee by eating each other. We also have a fourth faction that's coming out later this month, the Atavari Conclave. I can't show you anything beyond concept sketches of them right now, but their gameplay is very much more elite, very ninja-esque. They have a lot of psychic abilities that move enemies around. They themselves are extremely stealthy, hard to pin down, but once you do, they're easy to kill. And they only play maybe 5 or 6 models on the table, so smaller than any of the other factions, but they usually have more actions than the opponent. Now let's explain actions for a sec, because that's kind of the core mechanic of the game. The game is very much a kind of resource management game. Sequencing your activations and your actions correctly, as well as managing what your units can do in a single turn, is a core part of the strategy. As units activate, their profile tells you a certain number of these action tokens that they will generate. Each of those action tokens can be spent to do one thing. Those can generally be special actions or just moving and shooting. So interestingly, the game doesn't have any like advance or run mechanics where you move faster, because you can just spend more actions moving. Similarly, you don't get any bonuses for aiming or anything like that, because you can just spend more actions attacking. On its face, it's alternating activation, so I will move a model and then my opponent will move a model. However, there's a little bit of a twist. Each team has units called field officers. Here are the field officers for this team. This is Pack Mistress Farak. She's a special character in the starter set here. This is Johann Lucas. He's another special character. And then this is a regular-ass Volgox Howler, who is just a regular dude in the Volcrypt host starter. When you activate a unit, you must go with your field officers first, and they actually have orders that they can issue to your infantry to bring the infantry along with them. So while it is kind of like alternating activation, like Marvel Crisis Protocol or Star Wars Armada or something like that, what you're actually doing is going to be activating one of these field officers and then taking a little mini turn with like one squad or one fire team out of your team. Most teams have 2, maybe sometimes 3 field officers. So you're going to have 2 or 3 of these little mini activations where you go with 3 or 4 models at a time and buff them up with special abilities and use their actions before your opponent does the same. So the idea was that it's kind of a hybrid between alternating activation, which means that there's not too much downtime between the 2 players going, but the flip side being that it's all about activation order, and if you mess up your activation order or your opponent has more activations than you do, it can kind of devolve very quickly. And just a full I go, you go turn, where you get lots of control over what your guys do, but on the flip side, your opponent's sitting there for like 30 minutes not doing anything. Instead, it's like a hybrid, so you alternate with little tiny groups. Now, all those units' abilities and actions are available on their profile cards. Every unit has a special card for themselves, which you can get in packs, but they're also available for download online for free, too. Literally all the rules are online for free. You could play this game for $0 if you really wanted to. Obviously, we would all appreciate it if you bought our miniatures, because they're cool, but I don't know, you don't have to. We kind of just prefer that you play. Honestly, that would be much cooler. So just like a data sheet in 40K, each card has all the unit stats, their weapons, and their damage. Their damage can be marked with dry erase on the card itself. The cards are dry erase friendly if you just get them from us, but you can also just tear or sleeve them too, which is usually what I do just in case. But what also has profile cards are the missions in the game. And I mentioned that the competitive system does have some interesting narrative bents. And that's because there's a couple cool things about it. Honestly, everything about this game is cool. This game's perfect and flawless. Whatever. The missions are actually included as part of your list building when you construct your team, for the 1v1 games specifically. Each player comes to the table with 2 objectives. We got blue objectives, those are defense objectives, and we've got red objectives. Those are attack objectives. At the beginning of the game, you'll determine one player to be the attacker, one player to be the defender. They will use their corresponding objective that they selected when they made their list. So when you select your team of guys, of special operatives, you know what mission they're trying to complete. So you can pick the right guys for the job. Kind of makes sense, right? That's what you would do in an actual real-life situation. Real-life sci-fi battles. Each mission card then describes how that player scores victory points. You're trying to race to 10 victory points and have more than your opponent. Most missions can score 4 per round, so most games will go 3 rounds. And if the players tie, the game continues, and you keep going until one person has more victory points than the other, or kills all of their opponent's models. This means that while you're trying to do entirely different things to score victory points, there are no shared objectives on the battlefield that you're like both trying to control. You still have to go interact with your opponent's objectives in order to score. Now, the objectives are all pretty narrative stuff. The ones that we include in the starter set are data sabotage and data security. There are several computer terminals on the battlefield, and you have to go either hack them or secure them by interacting with them. But there are other ones, like destroying terrain, scanning the terrain for intelligence, retrieving intelligence packets from the battlefield, evacuating civilians from the battlefield. All that stuff is available in the competitive mode. You can pick them based on what you think you would like to do, what your team would like to do, entirely narratively, or if you have a very, very strategic plan to win, it is entirely under your control. The game also includes 2D terrain inside the starter set. Now, I know this is a controversial topic, so oh no. But the competitive mode of the game is 2D terrain friendly, so it includes these templates that outline the areas of terrain on the battlefield, and those are player placed before the game begins. So we've play tested and incorporated the terrain elements into the game wholesale. Some of the missions specifically use the terrain templates in order to generate mission objectives, and some of them incentivize terrain placement in different areas. That said, we also build out 3D terrain buildings that are sized for our templates, so every time we play with the 3D elements on top. But just like Games Workshop nowadays with their acrylic terrain bases, where you can remove ruins and stuff for measuring, that's kind of the same idea. You can remove the terrain from the template anytime you need to measure around it, but obviously we usually play with these because it looks much nicer than the 2D stuff. But between the mission selection step of army creation and the terrain placement phase of the game, it means that basically every portion of the setup of the game is also included as part of the strategy, which makes it super fun. And in some matchups, you want to, fight in a more open field where you push the terrain. Fucking tree. Where you push the terrain out to the sides. And in some matchups, you want the terrain to be constrained, where your opponent has limited lines of sight or can't move very freely around the areas in the center. And so you and your opponent, that's another little mind game you can play with them to try to get the terrain in the correct spot. So anyway, that's Breachstorm in a bit of a nutshell. Again, you can check it out on breachstorm.com, and I would really appreciate it if you do. This game's been kind of my baby for the last couple of years, and I'm excited that we're getting to a point where it's a real game with all cards and tokens and stuff. Isn't that sweet? You can get a whole starter set, which has a homeworld team and a Zren team and all the cards you need to play right out of the box. It's all in there, plus the terrain and the tokens and all that stuff. The other teams are available, and there's a bunch of expansions for each team as well. So there's additional models and units that you can incorporate into your team, which is sweet. And again, we're coming out with a 4th faction later this month, which I'm psyched about. We're going to be showcasing this at Adepticon, by the way. So if you want to come see me at Adepticon, come to the Breachstorm booth, come say hi, and get a demo, because we'll be demoing literally every day of Adepticon for as long as we physically can, until our limbs give out and our brains no longer recognize the results of dice rolls. So that's Breachstorm. If you want to go check it out and support the game, you can check it out over on breachstorm.com. All of the kits and STLs, if you're an STL person, are available over there. We also have a Patreon for the game. It's patreon.com/breachstorm. You get early access to new model STLs STLs, some wallpaper artwork, full art cards, some stuff like that, which is just some fun bonuses for folks who want to support the project. I should mention as well that this isn't like a new direction for Tactical Tortoise or anything. This is very much a side project that I have working on, but it's in the same space. I talk about it occasionally, and I really wanted to showcase it. I'm not moving away from Warhammer 40k or anything like that. This is still definitely my day job, and you could expect a lot more 40k content from me. After Adepticon, you can probably expect more videos as well, because I will have less on my plate when it comes to this other project. Also, I don't know what I did with the lighting in this video. I look older than I've ever looked in anything I've ever done before. Maybe it was the camera lens or something. I'm just a 58-year-old man in this video. But anyway, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of this video. Thanks to everybody who supports this channel, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/tacticaltortoise, YouTube channel members, Twitch subscribers. All you people are amazing and I love you. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and I'll see you in the combat zone, commanders.